Maybe I'll meet my best friend in the metaverse. Touchdown like an alien, trying to find a way I can stay in a new town, see a glass house with a stadium.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Omakase Show webinar series. My name is Lola or Olana. I'm host of this webinar series, but if you're not familiar with the Omakase Show, we do weekly webinars, weekly Twitter spaces, and we also have a podcast studio in Singapore, and we do our podcasts every month, at least we try to do so. And so before we start our amazing webinar, I just wanted to remind you that you can always support us by sending your donation in Ethereum. Just go to our profile on X, find the Omakase Show, and use this button to do so. And today we have an amazing guest who has an amazingly strong academia background, also an artist experimenting with generative art, AI, and lots of other things. Hi, Dr. Bill. Thank you so much for joining me today. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Good morning. My name is Dr. Bill Kalamjic. I've been doing computer art since the early 70s. I started out in art school majoring in industrial design, and the computer was just being used. And I saw some drawings done by William Fetter that showed the human form in extreme reach situations. It looked like life drawing to me. I started learning computer programming. Back then we had to write programs in Fortran, punch holes in cards, and submit those decks of cards to a central batch facility. And if you wanted a plotter, you had to wait 24 hours to get the output. So little by little, I started writing algorithms, simple ones like to draw. Only thing you could do back then was to draw a straight line, plot X, Y. And then you had to write code to draw that line. If you wanted a circle, it was a many-sided polygon made up of straight lines. So things were quite primitive in the beginning. So I went into the Army and I decided I wanted to make computer art when I got out. I was lucky enough to get an assistantship in engineering. And back then, the only people who had computers were big business, universities, and government. So I was at a university. I ran into another grad student who was majoring in this new major called computer science. And together we got into a room with an old computer, an IBM 1800, and we pretty much started writing code and doing funny drawings. So some of my earliest computer plotter drawings were very simple transformations. I turned the bananas into ice cream cones. I did a lot of tessellations. And from 1973 to 75, I made quite a few computer plotter drawings, and that culminated with me getting a MFA in graphic design and showing computer art, one of the first people ever to do so at the university, certainly, and maybe in the United States. So that's sort of my background.
Wow, it is a really rich experience. So I know you have an extremely strong academic background too. You enrolled industrial design, you have MFA at graphic design. In general, did it have any impact on your creative process and in general your art? And if yes, how did it impacted your work?
Well, the trick is the aesthetic. I mean, the computer and the plotter are basically tools. And with these very rudimentary tools, they couldn't do very much. So somehow you have to translate your aesthetic to the medium. So the medium for any form of art is what you have to master to get through it, to make individual expression. So I remember taking a lithography class and the professor grabbing me by the back of the neck after he found out I was making drawings with computer and taking me over the window and telling me that art comes from nature. And, there was a lot of resistance back then. The oligarchy didn't think it was possible to use a machine to make art. But that argument had actually been done before. A lot of people think you can't make art with a camera. So photography kind of set the way of technology involvement in the arts. I didn't listen to any of them. I just did it. As I got a little more significant, better at programming, I did more interesting things, and the influences, banana ice cream came from, some things I'd seen in a book. Back then, there was no internet. There was no way that artists communicated with each other. A book by Herbert Franke called Computer Art and Computer Graphics, I found it in a bookstore, and that really inspired me. It showed me works done by other people around the world. It put me in touch with some people. And those were the pioneering years. We did experiments. We needed a scanner, so we built one. We needed a light show, so we built one. We were, at the very beginning, the kind of the trunk of the tree of generative art, and there weren't that many of us. So it was a small community, and we supported each other. And the aesthetic just came with, not only what you could do, but what, you were trying to do. A lot of times you would think of an idea, but you ended up somewhere else based on the limitations of the tool. So the inspiration comes from life and from nature, and then how does that translate in what you produce with the media?
Mm-hmm. I see. Okay, thank you for sharing. And so in general, can you tell us about your creative process? I love the combination of colors. Sometimes you just go for like simple black and white option. Sometimes it's like really, really bright colors. In general, what is the creative process? How do you create this output, input to get an output from computer algorithms?
Well, that's kind of a tough question. I mean, where does inspiration come from? The creative process is I write computer code. It in its native form, it doesn't look like art, right? But you tend to build up ideas, and I actually have a formal structure that I use based on the work of George Kepish. It's where he wrote a book in 1946 called Plastic Design, and you have to define the picture space and understand what happens in it. You have to somehow divide the picture space up with what they call forms of spatial organization. That's the algorithm. For example, drawing a grid of images, dividing the picture space into equal squares, the tessellation. That's a form of spatial organization. And then finally, there's spatial forces, which are what do you put in the individual tiles, the parts of the screen that you divided up. So I have a process that I use now. So the picture space is everything. Once I decide that, then what kind of way am I going to divide that space up? I mean, it can be any number of things. Uneven divisions, circular divisions, tiles, motion graphic algorithms, whatever. So you have to somehow come up with a means of manipulating things in that space. And then what do you manipulate? So all the little funny things you see on the screen, they're sort of tiles, and the way you move the tiles around, is what's interesting to me. I mean, they're not always regular. Sometimes they overlap. I just did a piece based on the kind of mid-century modern design that was popular in the 60s, where I divided the space up using a circle packing algorithm. So that's another way of dividing the space up, where you try to fit as many circles into a plane as you can. So those circles kind of divided, made areas that you put things within. So I had a bunch of these atomic symbols, and once I divided the space up and had an area to put something in, I put in one of these atomic symbols. And of course, I underlaid a background in there. And so it's just a process. And it's like, where does art come from? Sometimes I see something and I want to do it. We did a piece most recently, my friend Chris Gussel and I, where we took an MC Escher drawing, Three Worlds, And we created our own world of a pond with multiple layers where we had a water falling on the surface, reflections of trees. We had a koi fish swimming underneath the surface. So sometimes inspiration comes from looking at other people's work. Victor Vasarely is an inspiration to me. I've always been fascinated by his work, but he died before the advent of computer. So he used to meticulously choose his colors and do his layouts, where I can look at it, I can figure out an algorithm, I can write code, and I can turn the color choices over to the computer using random numbers. So, it's just years of doing it where I have all these kind of processes I can pick and choose from to make my art.
Thank you so much for sharing. I just Googled Victor Vasarely. I've never heard of him before. And
Really?
I cannot imagine he didn't use a computer to actually do this art.
Oh, he's the king of optical art, man.
I see. And so, can you tell me about your time at PixArt? I know you worked with Toy Story characters. In general, I'm really curious, how quick is this cartoon industry to pick up a technology? In a way, whether you were experimenting a lot with the technology or you were working in a way that they prefer working, just drawing everything hand by hand, or just like a normal animation, graphic designs and things like that. Yeah, so just tell us how fast this industry is to implement technical changes.
Well, I've been doing this since the 1970s, and I was in art school until 1980, actually, and then I had a PhD. And then they threw me out of the university I was in. Once you get a PhD, they don't want you anymore. So I went over to Ohio State, and then there was a guy named Chuck Surrey who was over there, and he had put together this computer graphics research group. So although I was in engineering, I got an adjunct appointment over there. And Chuck was an innovator. That was the beginning of 3D animated computer graphics. And his idea was to bring artists and programmers together. And he let me hang out there because I helped him help the artists, make collaborations with the scientists. And I did a film back then, Goaty. It's on my Dr. Bill's Computer Graphics channel on Facebook. I mean, a lot of this old stuff is archived up there. But where was I going with this? That led in the 80s. I moved over to Northern Illinois. I mean, there were when I left Michigan State, I left my medium behind. And then it was hard then. Finally, in the mid 70s, 73, I got an Apple computer. And when I went to Ohio State, I was able to use a different set of machines, high-end machines that no one artist could afford, but you had to hang out with people to get access to that. There's a lot of stories of early computer artists kind of attaching themselves to larger corporations and working on the weekends to make computer art. So that's the way it was back then. That led to, I knew I had no future as an engineering professor since I was an artist. So I ended up going to Northern Illinois University and starting a program in electronic media. Again, we had small machines back then. We ran into an oligarchy that hated computer graphics, wouldn't give up the loom space to put in a computer lab, that kind of thing. And finally, I had a chance to jump ship, and your question was about Pixar. And I knew some people from Ohio State that were at Pixar, and they called me up and asked me if I knew anybody that wanted a job, and I said, yeah, me. So I took a chance and interviewed out there. And I ended up getting a job in marketing. And when I started at Pixar, it was a hardware company, Pixar Image Computer. And then 22 months after I got there, I got laid off. Steve Jobs, who ran the company, said, we're not going to make hardware anymore because our only customer is the federal government. But in the back room, John Lasseter and some of my friends were doing animated shorts that were winning Academy Awards. So the company made a transition. I started a company with some ex-Pixar employees, got hired back, and the movie Toy Story 1 took off, and it was like a mega hit. So I got hired back by Pixar, and my first job there was I was an evangelist. That was my title. Steve Jobs gave me the title, Renderman Evangelist. And I would go around the country talking about photorealistic rendering. I really wasn't making art. See, I fell asleep from when I graduated from college to when I started making generative art again for 41 years, doing other things related to computer art, but not really doing my art. So that's kind of my story. Sort of Rip Van Winkle. I don't know if you know the story about this guy who goes into the woods and falls asleep and comes out 20 years later, and the world changed while he was gone. So I was always in the periphery of computer graphics. I did a lot of marketing collateral. I did CD-ROMs for kids for Pixar, the animated storybook and activity centers. So a lot of my art wasn't for me. It was for like graphic design, commercial purposes. And finally, Disney saw a gold mine in Pixar and bought it out and got rid of the marketing department, which was where I was. And I had to go get a corporate job for 11 years doing learning architecture, and because I had a PhD in education, and then ultimately graphic design for learning products. So I did that for 11 years. I had to move to Florida to take care of my mother, who was ill at the time. And COVID, I got a job part-time teaching at the Art Institute of Tampa and then St. Pete College, adjunct professor, and then COVID struck. So it was when COVID struck, everything kind of stopped. And I had the chance, my son called me up and said, "Hey, Dad, have you ever heard of NFTs?" And I go, "What the hell's that?" So he told me, he showed me, we started publishing some of my old stuff as NFTs. I picked up programming again. So programming to me is like riding a bike. Once you get off of it, you can always get back on it. And I started looking at other generative art, looking at the art that I loved all my life, like Vasarely's works. Sort of was the segue back into programming again. And then my old plotter drawings and algorithms. I hooked up with my old friend Chris, who I was collaborated with in college. After he graduated, he went off to work for Bell Labs for 37 years. So I called him up and said, "Hey, you want to make art again?" So we're collaborating again. And a lot of the newer pieces are, he'll write some of the larger, the organization algorithms that I was talking about earlier, and I'll write all the forces and put it all together, and that you can start seeing a variety of stuff we've come up with over the last couple of years. So it's a great thing to do in your retirement, make art. You don't have to worry about where your meals are coming from. You have a lot of experience. I'm in a comfortable place. I live with a mermaid here in Florida. So I'm a happy man. So that's sort of my story. What else you want to know?
I see. Really interesting. And so in general, you talked about retirement. You talked about that it took you quite some time to be an independent artist. Why you pick generative art as your medium? Like right now, why is this one? Why not traditional art? Why not, I know, anything? Why exactly this one? Is it because you had this background at programming, or it is where your passion lies on?
Yeah, why not? I have some pretty unique skills. I did for a while paint fish on wood. I mean, that was for there's a lot of painted fish down here in Florida. But that was therapy. I was overcoming a divorce. But the one thing I am unique and good at is writing code to make images. I've had finally getting some recognition after all these years. We just did a presentation in Berlin, a symposium on generative art. And there was 2 days where I'm considered to be an OG, so the old people, and then the other day was the new people. So a lot of people now are starting to realize that generative art just didn't start yesterday, that there's a rich and wonderful history that it's built on. And I was fortunate enough in my life to be part of that rich and wonderful history.
Definitely. And so if you were to give any aspiring advice to emerging artists, what would it be? Especially to creative coders, maybe generative artists, how can they elevate their journey?
Well, this is a great question. I mean, even, the answer is to just do it. I mean, when I taught for a long time, and a lot of people, for example, when I came back to teach part-time, they said, "Oh, you worked at Pixar. I want to work for Pixar." And I go, "Well, what do you have to offer Pixar? Why would they hire you?" Right? So you have to establish yourself as an artist first and produce something, meaningful that other people might be interested in. Otherwise, why do anything? Art is funny. You can either do it for yourself or you can do it for other people. And a lot of people have a passion about art, but they they talk about it, they don't do it. So the first thing I would tell people is, if you're truly passionate about generative art, you can learn so much on the internet. All that information is there. You don't have to go to school anymore to be a generative artist. I mean, you can just type in, how do I program this? And, what's the code for that? And you can get all that information. So there's no excuses for anybody who wants to be a generative art, who puts the effort in to be a generative artist. It's the people that are, in my opinion, too lazy or want something easy for nothing that have the hardest trouble. Some people are gifted, naturally talented, and some, they're just wasting their time. They might as well be a hostess in a restaurant. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does, definitely. And so I just took this peek at this artwork, homage to Vera, I think Vera Molnar. So, yeah, okay, I'm right.
Vera.
Beautiful. Yes.
Homage to Vera is Vera Molnar is one of the huge success stories in generative art. She worked all her life in Paris. She's French. And I did an art show in 1980 called Art In, Art Out. It was hosted by the Ukrainian Institute of Modern Art in Chicago. It was a seminal show. It's a significant show. You can look it up on the timeline of Lorandom. I had 14 people I invited to display their artwork in the show. And at that time, there weren't much more than 14 people making art. I'm kidding, maybe there were 100. But these people submitted their works, and Vera Molnar was one of them. And we had a show. It was quite good. It's well documented. I have all the images from the show on my website, drbillkalamjic.com. And Vera Molnar was a true pioneer. She went through the same struggles that I did. The difference being is she stuck with it. She did it full time. She didn't go away to, teach or work at Pixar or anything. So she's very creative, and she used the medium in very unique ways. And she's being honored for that right now. I mean, her work is selling at Sotheby's for hundreds of thousands of dollars. So she died recently, I think. I did that piece kind of as an homage to Vera, because she used very bold colors and she used letter forms. And I like that about her. So that piece is an homage to Vera. I have other homage pieces. I mean, artists, it's hard to say. You're looking at all my work there. We've done a lot of things. I can tell you a story about every piece. That's the show. Those were the people that showed their work at the Art Institute of the Ukrainian Modern Art Institute in Chicago. The website, Dr. Bill Kalamjic, is interesting because I'm getting older and I'm trying to put together, all the things I have. A lot of the artwork I've kept under my bed for 40 years. So we're bringing those things out. We're offering them for sale. They're being collected. I just had a show in Buffalo, New York, AKG, where they acquired one of my artworks. It was called Electric Op. It was curated by Tina Ryan, and we just did that show. Their Slater Gallery has picked up 7 of my works for their permanent collection, digital collection. So, it's taken a lifetime to get some recognition, but hey, I'm still alive. Most artists are dead when that happens to them. So it's fun. I mean, I'm trying to answer your questions here, but I'm rambling. I'm hunched over looking into my little phone.
Oh, not at all, not at all. Actually, I got quite curious. You basically have an experience within traditional art, traditional exhibitions. However, you picked digital medium. You also launched a collection, Bitcoin, like Ordinals collection.
Ah,
So I took part in launching one Bitcoin collection. I know it takes a lot of time and effort. So in general, my question is why you decided to experiment with digital rather than traditional art?
okay. This is a good story. When I started doing generative art again, it was pretty overwhelming for an old guy that had been away from the scene for 40 years to get into the world of cryptocurrency and blockchains and all that. So that's when I ultimately ran into Stas Zablinski, who you met earlier. Stas is actually a patron, a collector himself, a friend, and he's actually my agent. So, if I got any business, I send it over to Stas. He deals with, he's my interface to the world of crypto and business. We're always looking for new channels, new outlets to release this work. And all these channels are developing, right? The flat FS hash developed. Every coin seems to have a platform. Bitcoin has kind of been in the background, and they finally have this thing called ordinals now. And it was actually Luke's idea through Stas to talk me into putting together an edition of my work for that environment. And the idea was to make those Bitcoin ordinals artist curated. So I had to modify my code where I implemented a random number generator that would generate a seed, because everything's based on random numbers. But if you give a random number generator seed, then it starts in the same place all the time. So we came up with, we offer 20 pieces up there. And they're historical. They're significant to me. The oldest one is the banana cone, and that's actually a fixed edition. There's 4 original pieces there. I mean, there's no randomness involved in that one. 2 other ones that like Scorpion Spin, and I forgot the other one. And then finally, another piece that's sort of Peter Maxian, has a bunch of color in it. So I wrote code, I generated the programs, I picked the ones I like by recording those seeds, and then I rebuilt the seed back in them so that every time one of those is produced, it produces the same set of random numbers and looks the same. But the difference is I picked them. So there's a kind of a unique twist on those. So Bitcoin ordinals, Bitcoin has really skyrocketed lately, and it has, it's the first significant coin and all that. So why not try that channel? And that's what we're doing. We're kind of fishing with that channel. Now we've got some new stuff coming. We've got a motion graphic called Plasma Balls, where I have these electric balls that bounce off each other. And we're going to explore, I think, another channel called Gamma, whatever the hell that is. But I don't have time as an old man, nor an interest to, stay on top of what the latest developments are in the world of NFTs and all this crypto stuff. And that's where my friends Stas and Luke come in. So if you have like specific questions you want to ask them about Bitcoin and those other channels, they're available right now, and you can bring them in and talk to them about it. But my job, and this was the deal I have with them, is I just want to make art. I don't have enough time to waste on, I don't call it wasting, but there's just so much. There's so much stuff. I just want to make art in my final days here. And I don't plan on dying tomorrow or anything, but, at my point in time, the most important thing is time and how I use it. So I have a love, a need, a passion. My mother was an artist. Both my parents were Ukrainian. My mother was a dancer and an artist. So I guess I have it in my blood. Save the Ukraine. Keep making art.
I'm too, and I was looking at your surname, and I was having a sense it should be Ukrainian. So wow, okay, amazing. And just today,
It is. It's Kolomeets.
Kalamians, yes, it is definitely a Ukrainian surname. And even like today, just before the webinar, I had one client artist, and we were talking about it. And he's just extremely overwhelmed about the idea that he has to work on marketing, on social media, and all these things. And in general, modern artists, they're like required to handle the finance, create art, run studio, handle social media. So it is like a lot of work. It's better like to delegate it. So yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like lots of stuff. So the final question is, you kind of mentioned it already, but what are you working on right now? And what are some upcoming projects we can expect from you?
Well, things have slowed down a little bit right now. The person I lived with, her house was flooded in a hurricane. So that's sort of my project right now, is helping her restore her house. But in the meantime, a few hours of downtime, I've managed to put together this plasma balls piece, which is up and coming. It's have you ever seen the Tesla tube where you put your hands on it and all the sparks come flying out? And then there's also the discs. So these are like Tesla discs that collide in each other in space. It's pretty interesting. That is on hold pending, our investigation of this other gamma kind of project. But I just finished on FS Hash. If you go to FS Hash and look at Dr. Bill Kalamjic there, a mid-century modern piece, which is kind of an homage to a couple of designers from the 60s, Paul Rand and a guy named Saul. I come from the 60s. I was influenced by art from the 60s and the 70s. It took a while for the popular art. It's right at the top. The one on the top is right there, the very top left corner. That's the latest piece. I just published that yesterday, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I've actually published, and if you go over there and hit infinity, it'll run right down there. Yeah. So you can see one program, hit it a couple times, how it changes with the algorithm. So that's generative art right there, a good example of it. Now, I don't know how popular that's going to be. Again, I make art for me, not everybody else. But I love this piece. So I spent a lot of time tweaking this. And that's the latest piece that I worked on right there. Prior to that, there's some good ones. We can just go kind of back in time. I'll tell you about the first few of them. The one next to it is a Vasarely influenced piece, the oblique transformation. And again, you can see the variations based on the random code in there. So that's sort of a 2.5D Vasarely piece. He's the optical artist. All right, let's go back and look at another one. The next one is not a tessellation. This is a piece that I worked on with Chris. Chris is a mathematician. And what happens is the tiles connect to each other in a very weird way. So not a tessellation is it's actually an ambiguity of limits piece. The spatial algorithm is based on the ambiguity of limits, or Zeno's paradox. There's a lot of concept behind these pieces. I mean, you're not seeing the full thing, you're just seeing a corner of it there. The question is, I publish them in different sizes. I don't know who's going to use them or how they're going to get used. I don't really care about that. I just, it's important to make art. The piece that I published, the MCM space piece, that was the 98th piece I published on FS Hash since 2022. So that's a pretty good volume of work for an old fart like me. And, that's just one platform. We've got a motion graphics gallery is on object.com. It's another platform where we got the motion graphics stuff, if you want to go look at that. We're just trying to generate art and make visual statements. A lot of people look at this stuff and get inspired. I hope that's true, and that's what artists do. They make stuff, right?
Definitely. I think your journey is extremely inspiring. Your team is also quite supportive, being here outside of the studio, just here for you. And so I just want to thank you so much for sharing your amazing background. I think it's extremely valuable, especially for emerging artists to understand this intersection of technology, art, experiment. And I just want to thank you for your time, for making it happen, for joining me today, and have an amazing winter holidays.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you. This has been kind of a technology challenge doing this on the phone, and I apologize for the quality. I mean, I'm much more beautiful and bigger wide angle lenses there. But I appreciate your willingness to invite me and to share my experience with you has been a joy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Bye.
All right.